Hi everyone, welcome back to the 5710 podcast, this time with Rab Bennetts from Bennetts Associates, which he co-founded with his partner Denise Bennetts in 1987. The practice has since won over 150 awards, including being shortlisted for the Stirling Prize 3 times and 26 REBA awards. With offices in London, Edinburgh and now Manchester, Bennetts Associates strive to create truly enduring architecture that is more than skin deep. They believe this is achieved through their pioneering expertise in sustainability, genuine approach to functionality, and beautiful crafted construction. Welcome back to the Scott Sutherland School.
Delighted to be here.
Did you come up from Edinburgh or London today?
I came out from London today,
Okay.
but I'm going back to Edinburgh afterwards.
That kind of leads me into my first question. You've got 3 quite large offices in Edinburgh, London and Manchester, as we said. How do you manage them? Are you quite hands-on, or is it all to do with good delegation?
Well, they're not quite as large as you think. I think overall we're about 70 people.
Okay.
And there are 5 directors, and I tend to look after Edinburgh.
Okay.
And 1 project in London. So other directors look after some of the projects in London and Manchester. So yeah. I don't go to Manchester much at all. But
okay.
That just means we have to pool our skills and talk to each other a lot and make sure we're all doing something consistent. So it doesn't develop into a firm with 3 separate design styles or separate attitudes. We're trying to make sure they're all coherent and similar.
Mm-hmm. Is it quite easy to do that, or is it another challenging part of the...
You have to work at it, because it's the easiest thing in the world to set up an office somewhere remote from the original office and just let people get on with it. And I think we're not inclined to do that. We like to be hands-on, and we like to be actually helping not only doodle and create the projects as we see them coming off the computer screens or drawing boards, but actually meet the clients and make sure they know who the hell we are.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously I've got a Scottish background, so I make it my business to be up in Scotland quite a lot.
Okay. Yeah. Is that Scottish background, does that feed into your design process kind of? And
well, I've often been asked that, and I think it does up to a point. I think there's a kind of directness about being brought up in Scotland, and there's a kind of honesty about things. Mm-hmm. And I think we're good at just getting things done, where certain other types of people you meet just talk about it a lot, and they're perhaps very cerebral, not quite so practical. Yeah. So there are differences, slight cultural differences, but not huge.
And as I said in the introduction, you've been a practice that's focused on sustainability for quite a long time. Yep. Maybe before that really came into the public consciousness in architecture. How do you integrate that into your projects? Is it an integral part for the whole thing, or does it come in later? Or?
Well, it's certainly meant to be integral to the whole thing. Yeah. And I could probably talk a long time about it, but just to go back a little bit, when we were students, you see, we had the 3-day week when there was an energy crisis. There was all kinds of things going on. So we were very conscious of environmental issues back in the 70s. Okay. And in fact, when we were leaving university, the first people we wrote to for work was the United Nations Environment Programme, to see if they had some job somewhere in the world that wasn't UK, where we could go and try doing some of that stuff. But of course it didn't happen. And we ended up in London, and I ended up, by luck, partly in Arups. And Arups were really good at the engineering and the theory of these things. They were just beginning to start looking at things like energy efficiency. Mm-hmm. And I was completely taken by that. I was really interested in it anyway. So we started developing ideas about energy efficiency right at the beginning of the practice back in the late 80s, which was very early. Mm-hmm. And by 91, we got our first really big project that was going to get built on the basis of low energy and more sustainable principles. Okay. So that's a long time ago now. Yeah. We can actually look back now, 25 years, at the first building we finished like that. And we did go back to visit it recently, and it does work.
Good.
So that was interesting, and it was partly that urge to do better for the environment, but it was also because it was good architecture. Mm-hmm. And we were finding the ideas that really worked were the ones that were architecturally interesting. Mm-hmm. So there was a kind of double benefit, if you like. Yeah,
that's kind of part of the sustainability. You want it to last. So it needs to be
I was thinking partly that, but also there's the form of the building. And for example, if you took a conventional office block, it would probably have a boring suspended ceiling and air conditioning above the ceiling. Yeah. With sustainable buildings, you certainly don't want to have a ceiling. You want to expose the mass of the structure to view. Yeah, exactly. You can avoid the air conditioning completely with opening windows. Mm-hmm. So the whole shape and form of the building is very different and much more interesting. Yeah. And wouldn't you rather do that?
Definitely. Similarly to the sustainability aspect, from your website and the things that are said on it, you seem quick to embrace new technologies. There's a lot of like animations on your website which you don't see as much in other places. Is that quite important to you as well?
Well, it's a tool rather than something we aim for, but we've found ourselves doing really good animations, working with our gaming software that we've come across. I think it's called Enscape, but you're not talking to the right person, because I don't use the damn thing. I also have to get the younger ones to make that thing work. But we find it enormously useful, and there are several different versions of it. So one where you can take the BIM model from the computer drawings, obviously full three-dimensional model, and simply walk around the building and it renders it instantly as you go, and so on. There's another one where we've got a whole city model of the centre of London. Oh, wow. And you can plant a building on it immediately just to see that it's the right size and shape and all the rest of it, and rotate it in 3 dimensions. And then it's got all the planning restraints on the model as well. I mean, the 3-dimensional stuff we're doing now is absolutely extraordinary. Way beyond my capability, I have to tell you. But it's light years different from where we were even 5 years ago.
Yeah. Well, actually, that leads me perfectly into the next question, which is how you've been an architect for a number of years. How, apart from the tech, just in the past 5 years, how have you seen the profession change since you first entered it?
Well, it's probably got more difficult, I have to say. It's far more difficult winning work. The procurement side of architecture is a nightmare, and it's very energy sapping, and you need a thick skin to get through all this stuff, because you get so many blows when you realise you've not succeeded in a tender because somebody's undercut you or whatever. That never used to happen. I mean, 30 years ago there were still fee scales and things like that. Now there's a pro and a con for field scales, but anyway, that's what it was. So the procurement side of architecture has been really difficult. Also, the position of the architect has been massively undermined, and that's partly the profession's own fault. The way the architects underbidding each other, or trying to take jobs off each other, or trying to do less for low fees, and getting less respect in the society as a result of that. And so the architect's position is nothing like as prominent as it once was, and some would argue that's a good thing, some a bad thing. But here we've got things like Grenfell fire, or the schools collapse in Edinburgh, the walls collapse and so on, and you think, well, how did we get to the position in those two jobs where certainly in the Edinburgh schools the architect was barely involved in the job? And you think, how did we get to that position? It looks like something similar might have happened at Grenfell, although we don't know yet, and so on. So the position of the architect has been massively eroded over 30 odd years, and it doesn't resemble what it once was. Now, at the very highest level, it's still a great place to be, and we're still enjoying good work. So I don't want to be over pessimistic about it, but it's a big change in my time.
So that's the past, but how do you kind of see the future of the profession as it continues as well? Well,
I think most architects have got to be optimists, because otherwise you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning, So, and I'm thinking that things like Grenfell and the Edinburgh schools, and also the collapse of Carillon, will make enough people to start to think again about how did we get to that position. What is the balance between economy and time and the quality of what we do for the long term? What is the role of the architect, and shouldn't it be a little bit more central? But that of course obliges architects to get better trained and so on. So I'm hopeful that there's a bit of questioning will come out of these horrible events to make people think there's a better way of doing things.
So when you're hiring students, in maybe you, but also as a company as well, what do you look for, whether personality-wise or portfolio-wise as well, whether part 1 or part 2?
That's a very good question, because we got it wrong for quite a long time, I think it's fair to say. We used to, like if we've got a project on and we need some people for the project, like let's get somebody in who can do MicroStation or the BIM model or something like it. So you end up with people being selected for those reasons. And so you build up a team, and then you realise, actually, I'm not sure these people are quite the kind of architects we had in mind. And that's all very late and so on and so forth. So I guess what we started to do after that was realise that you've really got to change a mindset first, and not a skill set. And if the person hasn't got the right skills, you can get them trained. You can invest a bit more money in it, and hopefully that'll be better for the people and better for us. So we're looking for people with the right mindset. And what that means, I think, is, well, obviously creativity counts for a lot, so you're looking for portfolios which are good. We like people who question things and are technically reasonably savvy, so they know when they're getting themselves into trouble. They might not know how to solve the problem, but at least they
know
understand
that there is a problem.
the questions that they have to ask. And they absolutely must be collaborative and good people to work with, because there's nothing worse than the brilliant individual who's a pain in the arse. And you don't really find projects built up around those people. It works collaborative. And I've always found when you're round a table together, doodling and passing ideas across the table and debating stuff, the results get better with communal effort rather than the brilliant individual working on their own.
Yeah, exactly. One person, it's very difficult to...
Yes, it is. And I mean, just looking around the studios here in Aberdeen, I mean, an awful lot of the projects I've been looking at have started off as a team project or a group project and then gone into an individual project. So people are already accustomed to the idea of working with colleagues.
Yeah, I think we do a group project.
I think that's massively important and very impressive. So I'd encourage it.
We're kind of getting to the end of this one, and we have 2 questions that we ask everyone. What memory from either your university or your architectural career is your favourite, or maybe a favourite story or something that you like to tell people?
I guess it's about rebellion. I mean, I think people are a bit too deferential sometimes at education. Okay. In our particular case, we got to our year out, we decided we'd go back to the same college to finish our final 2 years and began to regret it. And the 4th academic year was quite a struggle, actually. And we began to wonder, shall we stay for our final year? So we were looking at the options for a final year and realised they were all specialisms of one form or another. There was landscape, there was interior design, there was urban planning, there was various things like that. And so we thought, wouldn't it be nice just to keep designing buildings? You know, we've been doing smaller buildings, getting to bigger buildings, getting to really big buildings, and always feeling slightly inadequate. Why don't we go back down to a slightly smaller scale again, but just design the most beautifully finished buildings, including the concrete or the handrails or the cutlery and the curtains, or you know. So we wrote a little manifesto and presented it to the professor of the school and said, we don't want to do any of these options. We want to start a course of our own, hence the rebellion. And he said, oh, I don't know if we can really do that. It's all very difficult. I said, well, tell you what, if you won't let us do it, we're off to Cambridge because we've got places there. It was a fib, actually. But he said, well, okay, let's have a think about it. And he actually, to be fair, he got ourselves a bit of part-time tutoring, and we started a course based on this thing that we called Design Detail. And we loved it. We thought it was fantastic. And it ran for 12 years afterwards.
Oh, great.
And it's that thing about, you want to be an architect, let's design buildings. Let's not be a specialist.
Yeah, exactly. So final one. A student of architecture might go on a grand tour to see the best buildings or cities. What places would be, what one city and one building would you recommend them to go to?
Oh, crikey. That's a really difficult one. I mean, I was thinking you might have been asking about a tour, and I have never, ever forgotten the first time I went abroad properly as a student. I did a kind of thing, tracing the Grand Tour through Europe, and we ended up spending most of it. It was a pal of mine and myself. We ended up in Italy for most of the time, and then back. We went through Germany, down to Italy, back through France. But if you were to say what was the most memorable experience of that tour, I'd have said the first really fabulous Italian square we came across. It happened to be in Verona, in the north of Italy. And I began to realise the importance of public space rather than individual buildings. Now, there were good individual buildings, and there's some stunning ones in Verona and Rome and Florence and other places we went. But maybe the lesson of that was about streets and squares and the public realm.
Kind of the urban.
I thought it was stunning. Now, that was an architecture student without much money who could only get as far as Europe on an Interrail pass. It was actually the very first year of Interrail. If you had more money and you go further afield, I might have come up with a different answer, like the Far East or India or America. But that was off limits when I was young.
No, that's perfect. It's getting a more personal view of it instead of just the recommended places online. So that's perfect. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoy you're going back to Edinburgh, you said.
Yes, I've got work in Edinburgh on Monday, and I'm going to stay the weekend. And I've got a flat in Edinburgh, so it's nice to be there now and again.
Okay, great. Well, enjoy your weekend, and hope to welcome you back here soon.
Great.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Delighted to help.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll put who's joining us next week in the description. Thank you.